The Joel Embiid disrespect has officially gotten too loud. There is no doubt that the Sixers superstar is coming off the most frustrating and disappointing season of his career, but it seems like a lot of people have forgotten just how good this dude is when he is at his peak. Now, there is no way to not acknowledge the injury issues that he has sustained and continued to fight through, but I think a few too many people are closing the door on what exactly he can be for the rest of his career. This was put on full display by the latest Ringer Top 100 that just dropped, which had our very own Joel Embiid at 84th. That's right, out of all the players in the NBA, the top 100, Joel Embiid listed as 84th part of this list. That is higher than players like Denny Advia, higher like players like Kristaps Porzingis, Fred VanVleet, Kobe White, Miles Turner, Naz Reid, Josh Hart, DeAndre Hunter, Christian Braun. You're telling me those players are better than Joel Embiid, MVP Joel Embiid, and I get it. The injuries are the obvious concern here, and to hear them out fully on it, what they wrote up on Joel Embiid is a former MVP winner whose career has been derailed by injuries. The analysis from Michael Pina writes, there's a decent chance we've already seen Embiid's peak. No player entered the season with more pressure. No player has more of a combustious disappointment. Embiid has been betrayed by a body that can't stay healthy, and without the rigors of the NBA season, the Sixers didn't win the first game with him on the court until December 8th. Before the Sixers finally shut him down for good in late February, Embiid sometimes looked like a mummified version of his former MVP self. Worried about suffering another injury, try to conserve energy for the fourth quarter, or both. The next steps for Embiid's knee have yet to be announced, but he acknowledged earlier this year that he would likely need another surgery and another lengthy recovery period. Instead of thriving besides Tyrese Maxey and Paul George, another anticlimactic max contract recipient on Philadelphia's payroll, Embiid has spent most of his time on the sideline watching the Sixers stumble through a season that could end with them keeping a top 6 protected lottery pick. If it doesn't, they'll miss the play-in, lose the pick, and be forced to confront one of the bleakest futures in the league. Now, a couple thoughts here. For starters, this was obviously written a little bit ago. It does say the article was updated. This just popped on my feed yesterday. That's when it did what it said. It was updated at the top here, obviously written ahead of time. So they have the draft pick, they have the third overall pick. But there's another point that I do want to make here. We've seen, and to shout out Big Waz over there also at the Ringer, who's always been an Embiid hater, always been a Sixers hater. They were ranking the bleakest futures in the NBA. He put the Sixers as the worst in the Eastern Conference. And that is where I get to the point where the pendulum is just swinging too far. Even if you want to take Joel Embiid entirely out of this equation, even if you want to take Paul George entirely out of this equation, you're telling me that the Wizards have a brighter future than the Sixers. You're telling me that teams like the Chicago Bulls that are out there in no man's land, the Brooklyn Nets, the Charlotte Hornets, these are teams that you feel better about from a long-term future. You believe that there's players on these roster that absolutely will be better than a guy like Tyrese Maxey, that they have better NBA prospects than a guy like Jared McCain, than whoever the Sixers walk away with that third pick. The Embiid conversation is legitimate, and I'm going to dig into that as far as the future here. But I think a lot of people are not recognizing the assets that the Sixers team has, the young talent that this team has. Wake up. The youth movement has already started. Quentin Grimes, 24 years old. His best days still ahead. Jared McCain, 20 years old. Would have won Rookie of the Year if he was not hurt. Tyrese Maxey, still just 25. A lot more growing to do, and he continues to progress year in, year out. Guys like Justin Edwards, guys like Adem Bona. There is a legitimate youth movement going on below the surface, that there is a bright future for this Sixers franchise, even if you are completely out or skeptical of the Joel Embiid experience. Now, I mentioned a couple other guys there. Tyrese Maxey and Paul George also cracking this top 100 list. For Maxey specifically, he did end up the highest on the Sixers board at 39 points. And you can read a little bit of the analysis here. This one I would say is a little bit more fair than what I feel the Embiid article, the tone of that read. Reading the analysis, Maxey has juice. He doesn't run as much as he zips around the court like an electric car, and he covers ground in an instant. Whether he's pushing it in transition, relocating off a pass, or dusting his defender on the perimeter. He's a good shooter, despite subpar percentages this season, with a step back so sharp it can cut grass and range that extends by the year. His playmaking also took a major leap last season without James Harden around to dominate the ball, and has remained at that level thanks to a new underappreciated view. And it does it all with the positive spirit and infectious energy of your team's favorite role player. There's not much more to say about Maxey. It was a weird season by him last year. He certainly had peaks where he looked every bit the all-star caliber guard that we know him to be. He also had some down moments there. The 33.7% three-point percentage, pretty uncharacteristic for him there. This is a guy that's been top 5 in the NBA in three-point percentage in 2 seasons in the league already here. Shot as high as 43% from beyond the arc over an entire season on legitimate volume there. But I love that he's getting a little bit of shine, and I do think he will continue to climb up this list. Then Paul George, another guy that I think is viewed through a little more negative lens than probably should be the case. 90th. I understand. It was a disappointing season for Paul George. It absolutely was. I don't think that there's 89 players in the NBA better than him. This dude was an all-star in the NBA last season. That he dealt with injuries. He obviously did not live up to expectations. And the point that I'll continue to defend Paul George with is he was brought in to be Robin and then kind of asked to be Batman here. That's sort of how this season went down with Joel Embiid not on the floor. And PG just dealt with injuries right off the opening rip. That first knee bone bruise happened in preseason there, and he never got fully healthy to that point. Taking injections midseason just to get on the floor. Doing things that guys in the playoffs do just to be available here. That does not excuse any of the actual play, and there's certainly things to be frustrated with, but I do think the overall perception of Paul George is a little bit more negative than the actuality here. Now, when we get to the Joel Embiid conversation here, obviously we have to put injuries right at the forefront. There is no doubt that dude did not look like that dude last year. The Joel Embiid that we have come to expect did not look like that version of himself. He averaged 23.8 points per game, 8.2 rebounds, 4.5 assists, shot 44% from the floor, 29.9% from three. And let's not forget the context of it is probably what's most important to me. He didn't have any sort of vertical ability. He did look like he was lumbering on that leg. And by the way, we have yet to hear an update on how that knee surgery went. We are 8 weeks past that timeline now. I do think that the Sixers are just going to continue to keep things close to the vest. I also will note that they pretty much clean house on just about their entire PR department. Not my favorite thing personally. Everyone that I had a relationship with in there is out the window. But my perception from afar is that a lot of stuff got out last year that shouldn't have been the case, and the Sixers aren't digging through to figure out who the culprit is, that they're cleaning house, starting over, and that's the mindset from here. Whether or not that's the right call or not is to be determined. That is sort of my feeling there, and obviously starting fresh, so we'll see what that means for everybody involved, but obviously a lot of frustration in some of the things that did leak out that shouldn't last year, in regards to Joel's health, in regards to some locker room meetings. There was a lot of that happened, but when speaking about Joel Embiid specifically, I think a lot of us forget that just 18 months ago, a year and a half, Joel Embiid was averaging 34.7 points per game, 11.0 rebounds, 5.6 assists, 1.7 blocks, and 1.2 steals, shooting 52.9% from the field and 38.8% from beyond the three-point arc. I understand a lot has happened in a year and a half, but that is not that long ago in the grand scheme of things. And for the Sixers specifically, sure, you can call it insane. You can call it the theory of insanity of trying the same thing over and over and hoping it works. But my pushback would be, what is the best option here? What other alternative do you have? And my point once again would be the youth movement has already started. That I think the Sixers, in their mind, behind the scenes, have already begun to turn that page. But they can't fully do that. There is no way to just move on from Joel Embiid. And why I say that is the contractual aspect of things. Looking at Joel Embiid's contract, on the books for $55 million next year, $59 million the following season, $64 million in the 27-28 season, and a $69, almost $70 million player option in that 28-29 season there. He's got a lot of reasons to want to return to the floor, and for all these frustrations that we have about Joel Embiid, so does everyone else. Every other team sees these same issues, the lack of availability, the frustrations with him being injured, all these things, a potential decline, and the track record for big men aging into the 30s just not being strong. That is a contract that, while it is not impossible to move in theory, when you're talking about actually valuing an asset or making the most out of it, there is not even a conversation to be had about what you can get in return being even potentially close to the best version of Joel Embiid. I don't think Paul George falls in that exact same category, as I do think he's a more movable contract and a player that you can plug and play on most teams, just about any team, in a way that is not true of Joel Embiid there. But I do think Daryl Morey has to sit there, acknowledge this, measure the options, and think, why would I move on from that if I'm just selling him low? Joel Embiid's stock has never been lower than it currently is. Clearly, the 84th best player in the league, according to TheRinger.com. But I do think a lot of people have forgotten just how talented this guy is. Is the MVP version of Joel Embiid gone? Probably. but is a guy who can be a high-level, impactful player on both ends of the floor completely out the window, I'm not willing to go that far. I do think there's a world where Joel accepts a little less ball-dominant role, lowers that usage, relies on guys like Maxey, like Jared McCain, like Paul George, that he begins to embrace what he needs to do defensively. And by the way, for as talented as he is, he's always been, defensively at least, far more of an IQ guy than an actual impact. Think about, just watch the way the guys attack the lane and just are afraid to shoot around him. If that version of Joel Embiid can return, where he is super impactful on the defensive side of the floor, where he still can have his nights where he pops off as a scorer, but he does do the little things, is more willing to rely on his teammates, that can lead to a very successful team. So the Joel Embiid experience certainly feels, like I said, an all-time low. But I'm begging you guys, don't get off this roller coaster ride just yet. He is here to stay. The Sixers are married to Joel Embiid, whether or not you want to admit it or not. And ultimately, all they can do is hope for the best from an injury luck. But the disrespect has gotten far too loud. And notice, we will not be writing back now that Joel Embiid has been written off. Let me know what you guys think about all that in the comments. I'm over the Joel Embiid disrespect to this point. It feels like it has been an up and down sort of experience with him. That certainly we all feel the same frustrations that get projected very loudly nationally here. But he is our guy at the end of the day. That is our dude. That is the process. And ultimately, this starts and ends with his experience on the floor. So we'll see what happens from here, but appreciate each and one of you guys tuning in. If you have not already, make sure you are smashing that subscribe button, dropping a like on this video, and I'll be back talking to you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.